70,000 foreign legionnaires went to war in Indo-China in the 1950s. It was not uncommon for 40%, and in the end, up to 60% of some units to be German-speaking. To this day, many myths and legends surround this topic. After the end of the Second World War, France, as part of the Allies, had to take care of hundreds of thousands of German prisoners of war. After the devastating war, the Foreign Legion was only a shadow of its former size and fighting strength. New personnel were therefore urgently needed. The instrument of repression in the colonies had to be replenished. There were also plans to restructure the French army. The cumbersome army of 1940 was to be transformed into a modern armed force. There were also plans to set up a mobile intervention force comprising 16 divisions. One of these divisions was to be formed entirely from foreign legionnaires. However, since hardly any Frenchmen could be recruited alongside collaborators who wanted to escape persecution in their own country, new possibilities were sought. The recruitment of starving prisoners of war was probably relatively successful, so that in some places even entire units signed up. Alongside the SS men, who were threatened with long prison sentences, many of the Wehrmacht prisoners hoped to return home or start a new life. However, hunger, the lack of prospects for young people, not finding their way in post-war life, war returnees, or simply a thirst for adventure, gradually filled the ranks of the legionnaires. The recruitment offices in the French occupation zone had an effect. However, between 1945 and 1947, the Legion was only able to be increased to 19,500 men. Little consideration was given to who was recruited. There were regulations not to recruit undesirable war criminals or SS men, but these were handled very tersely. For example, the men were supposed to have an arm to show that they did not have a tattoo of their blood group on their lower left upper arm, as was common in the SS and Waffen-SS. As a result, many men were found to have conspicuous scars in this area. Even a disparaging remark about the Gestapo was proof enough of an anti-SS attitude. Initially, numerous members of the Waffen-SS probably joined the ranks of the Legion in this first wave. Sometimes they were also recruited in the knowledge of their past. Later, after this practice became public knowledge, it was difficult, at least for German members of the SS, to enlist in the Legion. At the very least, however, care was taken to ensure that no prominent war criminals were accepted into the ranks. From the recruitment offices, the men were eventually taken to North Africa to be trained there. The new recruits with war experience, including the many SS men of the first wave, were immediately sent to Indo-China. The Legion was a place for masculinity. It meant toughness towards oneself and others. One sacrificed oneself for a concept of honor. And these were virtues that were familiar to the men of the former Waffen-SS and fell on fertile ground with them. The recruitment of Germans has been a tradition in the Legion since its foundation in 1831. Under Louis-Philippe I, King of France, the French made their leap into North Africa and began colonization. Since then, Germans have fought for French dominance in the African colonies. And even in 1940, 35% of the Foreign Legion consisted of Germans. During the Wehrmacht's summer campaign against France, German legionnaires were not deployed to Europe. Letting them fight against the Germans seemed heartless to the French, and was certainly associated with some risks. When Hitler entered Paris, there was an open mutiny among the German legionnaires in the Algerian garrison of Sidi Bel Abbes. They marched through the streets of the Arab city at parade pace, shouting "Heil Hitler" and singing Nazi songs. Finally, they demanded to be taken back to France to join the Germans. After the men beat up Jews from their own unit, Senegalese were deployed to restore order. Eventually, the majority of the German legionnaires were repatriated under pressure from the German government. Later on, there were plans to recruit German prisoners of war from the Africa Corps for the Legion again after the defeat at Tunis in 1943. However, it still seemed too unsafe for the French to arm Germans in the name of the Legion. On March 22nd, however, it was decided to recruit Austrians among the prisoners of war. There were probably many Germans among them, as it was difficult to establish their identity under these circumstances, especially as many wanted to escape the poor conditions of the prisoner of war camps in North Africa. However, the recruited Germans and Austrians remained in their garrisons in North Africa and were not shipped to Europe. On the one hand, there was a great deal of mistrust and, on the other, the Hague Land Warfare Convention prohibited the use of foreigners against their own country. By 1945, however, all this had been forgotten, and the Germans were fighting in Indo-China to preserve the French colonial empire. The French appreciated the battle-hardened men. Another advantage was that they were familiar with the equipment captured from the Wehrmacht. The Expeditionary Corps deployed in Indo-China was characterized by German military tradition, which was reflected in the marching songs, among other things. For example, SS Marches in Enemy Land was rewritten as the Legion is Marching. It was incidents like this that earned the Legion its reputation as a bastion of former SS men. And many legionnaires spoke openly among their comrades about their past in the Waffen-SS or SS. There were men from the SS Totenkopf Panzer Division, the Reichsführer SS Panzergrenadier Division, or the Hermann Göring Parachute Division, and even former guards from concentration camps. Numerous members of the SS Charlemagne who were unable to return to France also enrolled under Belgian nationality. There were also numerous other former Waffen-SS men, for example, Ukrainians or Bulgarians. However, the proportion of SS men among the German-speaking legionnaires probably never exceeded 10%. But they did exist. Not inappropriately, the British legionnaire Adrian Liddell Hart said, at the beginning of the Indo-China War, many were formerly in the Waffen-SS, but even more said they had previously been in the SS. Membership of the SS was probably part of good manners among the German legionnaires. But what the Legion appreciated about the Germans from 1830 onwards was the general fighting morale and fearlessness that many of these men displayed and which has been passed down in numerous stories. There was the company drummer Otto Schmidt, for example, who was wounded in his left arm in Morocco in 1835 but continued to drum until he was shot in the head, or the legionnaire Streibler, who threw himself in front of his company commander in Indochina in 1885 when he saw a Chinese man aiming at him and sacrificed himself for his captain. In Indochina, the legionnaires were fighting a foreign war. The guerrilla tactics of the Viet Minh led to a merciless battle for every village and every road. In 1949, the heavy losses caused the Legion to increase recruitment and ironically reach its original target strength of 23,500 men. After many losses and disillusionment about the brutality of this war and a longing for home after many years abroad, some Germans defected to the Vietnamese. They were welcomed by the Viet Minh as their knowledge of French tactics and weapons was of great value. Only when China became involved in the conflict were the Viet Minh strong enough that they no longer needed their Germans. Many of them were sent to the GDR. All too many came back to Europe in a coffin. And some were discharged after 5 years of service and given French citizenship. The legionnaires never made up more than about 1/6 of the French troops deployed in Indochina. At the end of the war in 1954, the Germans among them made up a maximum of only 1/12 of all soldiers. However, never again were so many mercenaries recruited for the Foreign Legion in a comparatively short period of time as in the years 1945 to 1954, namely around 75,000. Among them were around 35,000 Germans. If you like the video, please leave a like, a comment, and a subscription.